We're just preparing the live stream. So Mr. Yankee won't have to remind me. We're just preparing the live stream. So Mr. Yankee won't have to remind me. Okay, we can begin.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the June 14th called Planning Commission meeting to order. Please allow me to read into the record. In accordance with the Freedom of Information Act, a copy of the agenda was posted on radio, television, newspaper, placed in newspapers and posted on the bulletin board in the county administration building. And so we certainly appreciate the public joining us here today on our call meeting. And at this time, I will turn it over to staff to begin covering our first agenda item.
All right, for today's meeting, I'll turn this over to Mr. Crooks. Because I believe previously we deferred this because there were some questions about some of the comments that y'all have received. And I know some of you had not had a chance to really go over those, I guess, extensively enough that that you felt comfortable with. So that was the main reason for the deferral. I believe right now we're here to help answer any questions that you may have. And also, like I said, we'll look forward to answering those, and hopefully we can provide any clarity that you may need.
Thank you, Mr. Price. And just one comment of note to the staff. Thank you all for sending over some of the clarifying information and documents that the Planning Commission did receive. And we know that several commissioners wanted to have the opportunity to explore some of that a little bit further. And so commissioners, thank you for your time and attention today to begin to do that so that we can be prepared and informed to send the Land Development Code over to council for their consideration. And so at this time, if there are any additional comments from commissioners regarding the information we've received, we can begin to explore that at this time.
Mr. Chair, I've got some if nobody else wants to go ahead.
Yes, this was
Mr. Branham.
Branham. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Thanks. So on page 2-24 of the draft from April, I'm looking at the subsection 3 towards the top of that page 2-24, the zoning map amendment procedure. And I wanted to, request some sort of addition potentially that says something like, if a recorded plat showing the location and boundaries of the subject area is not already in place in the county register of deeds, that the application should include a rezoning plat showing the location and boundaries of the map area. We've run into this before from experience where we've just got rough lines and rough estimates for portions of parcels that are being applied for a rezoning. And it's just not as exact as it seems like it should be for something that is that important. So that was just one thing that I wanted to note.
Mr. Branham?
Yes.
Chair, may I be recognized?
Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
sir. Mr. Crook, go right ahead. Sorry,
So Mr. Branham, I just wanted to make sure clarification on that. So you're saying, so under that, as part of the zoning map amendment procedure, including a specific requirement on there in relation to having that survey or plat or what have you, or so you're saying that you have to have a registered plat for that submittal in relation to the zoning map.
I'm just saying, it certainly doesn't need to be recorded, but I would like something that was actually surveyed by a registered surveyor so that we knew with certainty what was the subject of the case and the application before us.
Have we not been in providing that, requiring that previously?
I believe so, Mr. Price. I was thinking that was more so related to our application requirements. Let me see if I can pull that sheet up that's on there. But I want to say it's either a survey or a copy of the plat or something along there that is required as part of that submittal.
Yeah, we haven't been provided it. If it's been required, we haven't always been provided it.
Mr. Branham, one of the things that we don't include in the package is the actual plat itself. However, for an application, especially for cases when they're only doing a portion, we do require them to provide us with a survey showing that portion that is subject for the request. And our GIS actually shows that when they do the zoning map that's provided to you, they use that to make that determination. But we do require for staff, as part of the package, that you do provide us with a survey plat showing the subject parcel for the remapping request.
Okay, yeah. So again, we just haven't always been provided as a commission. So, and it seems like it would be a good idea to go ahead and document that and make it a requirement, codify it while we're.
Well, I mean, if that's the case, I think what you're asking is that we just include the plat as part of your package for each case.
Yeah, you could take it that way. I just don't know if an applicant would ever push back on you and say, the LDC doesn't require that I do that, so.
Okay. I mean, I get where
Anyway.
you're going. I get what
Yeah.
you're doing. It's safe
Yeah.
to go ahead and have it in that text, so if someone.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that has always been our requirement.
Yeah, some of my comments and questions are gonna be more technical, some would be higher level. That was just one. On page 2.4, under the powers and duties of the planning commission, there's no reference to street naming. Is that gonna go away?
That would not be going away. I think that's just a missing element.
Okay,
So it would be one that we would need to include, Mr. Brown, today.
so you got that?
Or so that would be B1. Approval, street names.
You got that noted then?
Yes, sir. I have that written down
Okay.
now.
All right, on page 2-9, and tell me if you already caught this, but subsection B1 there, it says the purpose of this section, it's just missing the word of. Purpose in this.
Yeah, so that would be a Scrivener error. And so
Yeah.
that one we wouldn't need to take any type of formal action on.
Okay. All right. Under that, on that same page, this is related to one of the recently proposed changes, the subsection 2, I think, with the applicability, pre-application neighborhood meetings. And I think some of the comments of the staff get to the same point that I had in mind as well. And I don't know, maybe I've mentioned it already, but the draft said the pre-application neighborhood meeting is required. And then the updated recommended change eliminates it completely. But there is a note, the last note says, or would be, an alternative would be to make it required for those application types, but only of a certain size. And, you know, that seems like that makes a lot of sense to me. And I mean, we could swing completely to one extreme or another, but that's might be a good middle ground.
Yeah, so Mr. Branham, I think that would be a good discussion point here. And so, looking at that recommendation, this is where originally, if you go back to module one draft, where at that point in time, it was optional for both of those, but based on a lot of feedback and comments that had been received, looking at, requiring it for certain application types. And then again, here, kind of how do we expand upon that a little bit better? Because again, there's going to be moments where we get, thinking about the applications, not thinking about who the applicant is, where it's just the applicant. And the applicant can be, a developer, as we a lot of times think of them, or it could be somebody's grandmother. And so, that applicant is not treated any different. And so we would be then at that point, looking at that alternative option, treating the applications different versus the applicants. And so that way, if it's of a certain size or a certain number of units, that becomes a little bit, I guess, more of a feasible option. But a lot of these for us in terms of staff's perspective, a lot of those are by right uses. And so don't think it's necessarily for having that neighborhood meeting where that by right use is going to be that by right use, or pigeonholing a map amendment. But, again, looking at those thresholds of where it becomes a little bit more of a significant impact based on an application type, that's where we feel it could be a little bit more appropriate for that to be required versus leaving it as optional.
Yeah, agreed. On page 2-12 on subparagraph 3, it looks like.
Hey, Jason, can I cut in for just a second? This is Heather. Hey, and maybe I'm just like not only hearing every other word or something, but back at this pre-application neighborhood meeting, I'm stumbling. So I'm back on page 2.9. So B1 says that these are optional. And then B2 says the meeting shall be conducted by the applicant. And right off the bat, I'm like, wait a second, are they optional or are they required?
Right. So yes, ma'am. So Ms. Carnes, so 2A says that a pre-application neighborhood meeting shall be conducted by the applicant, et cetera, for zoning map amendments, major land development permit, or a major subdivision sketch plan. And then any other application type is optional.
I don't think that's clear at all when purpose 1 starts out by saying they're optional. So every zoning map amendment has to have a neighborhood meeting?
That's what the public hearing draft, the way it is written, that's what that would require.
It seems insane. Sorry.
Yeah, that's where that second recommended change that we got last week tries to, modify that, walk it back a little bit. And that was my comment, is that maybe just based on the scale of the proposed change as it relates to land area, that might determine whether they're just advisable versus required. But okay, so yeah, that was that part.
And so there's ambiguity and just sort of a seemingly crazy request that every zoning map amendment would require a public meeting. Okay.
Kind of in the Scrivener's error realm, that subparagraph 3 on page 2-12, the second to last line in that subparagraph 3, determination as to whether to not the proposed development, seems like it should say as to whether or not the proposed development applies.
So we're at, Mr. Branham?
Page 2-12.
Oh, subsection 3.
Yep, the second to last line.
Second to last line, determination as to whether, so whether or not, and rather than whether to not.
That, I think that's what was meant there.
Yeah, I'd say that's also a Scrivener error.
Yep, okay. On page 2-16, the table, type and timing of required public notification, under that notes area, that the one and only note says posted notice is not required for a zoning map amendment of multiple parcels that is initiated by the county council. I was curious as to why that would be.
So a good example of that would be, for instance, the remapping. So you're doing multiple parcels and, sort of thinking about this, mapping every parcel in the county. Do we go out and post every single parcel? So that's kind of where it's just where you're doing a larger percentage of, say, like a whole neighborhood area kind of thing. So, let's say, as another example, we proactively looked at rezoning hardscrabble. So where we had multiple requests come in over the past couple of years, instead we took a proactive effort to say, all right, hey, land use wise, zoning wise, we think this makes the most sense. So rather than posting all 100 or so properties that may be affected by that, just providing that notice otherwise with it. Mr. Price, you got any comments in relation to that one?
Sorry, I was muted. No, sir, I think you actually addressed that. Exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's just a strict reading. All you got to do is get county council to be the ones to initiate it. Even if it's only 2 parcels, you can move it through without the same kinds of notice that would be given to other rezoning request, map amendment requests.
I see that, but it's like, if we were still doing, 5 parcels kind of thing, or the example that we talked about last week up off of Blythewood Road, we still post those. That was 3 or 4 properties kind of thing. Those were still posted, but it's not kind of a large swath of area.
Yeah.
I think it's just where you get to an exorbitant amount of parcels where that posting, you're really kind of looking at it at that point, it's becoming effective.
I don't know if there's just another way to say that. A literal reading could just be 2 parcels,
Right.
Page 2-17.
Real quick, I got something to say about that one. Chairman?
Sorry about that, Mr. Dennis. I was on mute, but yes, sir, go right ahead.
Yes, sir. So going back to what Commissioner Brown was talking about, the posted notice is not required for the zoning map amendment initiated by county council. I understand what Mr. Crooks is saying. However, I think we need to find a way to word that, because I understand it. However, in the nature of things that we are in with this, we need to make sure that it's worded correctly so that it doesn't allow us to do something without the public knowing it in the future. I understand why we got it, but we just need to really work on the wording on that. Maybe, say just for the LDC rewrite or something. I don't know exactly how to put it. I couldn't wrap my head around it last night. I kept thinking about it, but I mean, in all transparency to the citizens of Richland County, I do think we need to have some limitations on that.
Yeah. All right.
So, and I guess my question, and I guess speak for all commissioners, so what would be an appropriate, threshold at that point? Because really that's what it comes down to. Because I think 2, that's a little too small, because that's a little bit, if we're looking at specific quantified language, well, that's a little too specific. But at what point do we, look at a generalized area, or do we look at, size, or do we look at number? What becomes that threshold measure then for what that would entail?
But could it be a newspaper publication type?
Yeah, so we would still have to post newspaper and follow the other posting requirements in relation to that, but we just wouldn't be posting the property specifically. But we would still do publish notice and all of that. Yeah, that would still take place.
That and some kind of requirement, quote unquote, that the county council's agenda specify the parcel numbers are to be considered. Just thinking out loud.
I agree with Commissioner Branham on that. I mean, you know, as long as we put that in there, I think that covers it to show the transparency, what we're trying to accomplish with this. You know, where we still have it posted. Because I mean, the way you read it now, you wouldn't have to post anything.
We wouldn't have to post the property, but we would still have to publish the notice of the map amendment in the paper.
Well, then can we just add the publish it in the paper, and I mean that extra wordage onto that note?
I mean, I suppose so, but I guess that's already included within that, within the chart. Because the footnote would only be specifically for posting of the signs at the property. That's all that footnote would be about. It wouldn't deal with doing mailers or publishing in the paper. It would just be about posting that specific property.
So then why don't we just change it? Posted sign notice is not required for a zoning amendment map for multiple parcels.
So just turning that language around in the footnote.
I think that
Could work.
I think that would ultimately get what we're trying to, you know, what we're talking about here done. I mean, that's me. Of course, there's other commissioners on here.
Oh, I get it. I mean, I think staff and whoever drafted this intended posting, you know, it means putting a sign in the ground.
Yeah.
Not like putting something with the post office or whatever.
But I mean, the reason why I say that is because, you know, the people out there that read this that aren't in it like we do reading it, they're like, well, nobody's noticed. Nobody had to tell us. And I think that just covers transparency with the public.
So could you repeat what you were saying, Mr. Dennis, for me?
I think the post in note 1, where it said posted sign notice is not required for zoning map amendment of multiple parcels.
So posted sign notice. So
Right.
just adding sign in there.
Yeah, just, you know, the signage that we stick in the ground, but you know, everything else I think does suffice. But you know, it's on the agenda, it's taken out in the paper. All that other stuff is already being handled. You know, we were just looking to get rid of the signs. And I think that covers us to ensure that the other stuff is still done.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense.
So if I could move it on and cover the next item I had, it's page 2-17.
Okay.
Section B, posted notice requirements. And I know I've covered this with staff, but just wanted to say it again. This is changing the minimum distance between signs that are required to be posted on properties that are up for map amendments. The current distance, as is referenced in the footnote, is between 100, every 100 feet and 300 feet of road frontage. And the new draft proposes one notice for every 1,000 feet or fraction thereof. So that's approximately having signs approximately 10 times farther apart than they are right now and providing posted public notice. I don't see the wisdom in that when it comes to encouraging public engagement or at least providing public notice to what's going on in the community. I think it's a lot easier for somebody to take a route that doesn't involve them passing a sign that's 1,000 feet apart versus signs that are 100 feet apart. So anyway, I'll just leave that at that. But the footnote on page 2-18, I was wondering, the one that's number 44, this section includes requirements for the Planning Commission's public hearing and recommendations. Should that say public meeting, or are we, because we currently call our, are we
Yeah, that
changing
should
the,
be public meeting. Yes, sir.
okay. If we're changing the,
I believe that's, let me go and make sure, because I think we do, let's see, staff review and action and public hearing.
Now, there are cases, I just want to chime in, Mr. Branham, but there are cases when the Planning Commission does actually hold a public hearing. Typically, it's not for the map amendments or text amendments, but you can hear for appeals dealing with land use of the department.
Uh-huh.
Would actually be a public hearing.
Okay. Within the context of that footnote, though, it should be meeting.
I think that one itself would be public hearing. So we're talking about on, so 2-18, subsection C at the top, time, date, place of the public hearing.
It was footnote 44, wasn't it?
Specifically within a footnote.
Yeah.
Please require the planning commission. I don't think it necessarily matters in that one.
Okay.
For the footnotes, because the footnotes are, right now, they're just used as footnotes. You know, they're going to be removed in the final version. And so really this is just, the footnotes are there for informational purposes as needed.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I guess at the bottom, the page 2-25 kind of gets to some of the criteria that we would be looking at on zoning map amendments under the proposed LDC. This reference here, footnote, it says 58, I think.
Mhm.
Carries forward 26-52, except it does not require the planning commission to determine the amount of land in the general area having the same district classification as that being requested. So that's just something I want to call out. And then it's kind of relatedly on page 2-26, where it gets into that subsection 4 gets into the decision standards for zoning map amendments. As I frequently reference in our meetings, we currently have 4 criteria under the current LDC. We're supposed to review this and write 7. That second one, I think as it were, speaks more specifically to uses. And by doing so, you know, the emphasis on density and setbacks and things like that is diminished or eliminated. So I'm not sure if that's what we really want. Just something to think about. I know that's a general theme in some of the proposed changes, increased density. I was interested on that note too, just page 2-29 under section H there, item 2. This is for minor deviations in developments. Yeah, increase in residential density of 10%. Yeah, that's deemed just a minor deviation. So definitely very much a pro-density worded provision, as are some others.
So I say, Mr. Brandon, to that one for the minor deviations. I mean, you're looking at kind of those as all as a whole. And so, you know, it may not only just be one thing, but also how does it affect the rest of them too? So if you were going to increase something, but then you're going to increase your overall density, you know, well, maybe it's just looking at, all right, well, we got to remove another land use from single family if we're going multifamily or multifamily to single family. And a lot of that language is similar to what we have within the current code also.
Okay. And I just wanted to specifically turn to the recommended changes that were most recently provided over the last week. With that first line item, the remove section 26(1.9)E zoning districts from the text. The rationale, transition table would not be applicable as there is no single equivalency for all of the districts in most cases, and keeps with the message that is an entirely new code. So I guess, does that mean if you know, I was standing on a residential lot, or I picked one out in Richland County, not in a municipality, and I was to say, what is this going to be zoned as when the LDC is adopted? You wouldn't be able to tell me with certainty, would you?
And I'm not 100% certain, no, but that's where we're talking about things being equivalent right now, where we're saying, okay, this is the most equivalent to this. So if you're in an area where you're not really seeing, or expected to see any type of growth development kind of thing, or any change really, if your place is really, it's built out, it is what it is. So you're currently zoned as an RSMD, you're probably going to expect to be whatever the most equivalent to RSMD is. So you're likely to be that R3 or whatever
Okay.
in that place.
Yeah. That gives me a lot of pause. Just the reality of that.
And again, and that's, Ms. Brandon, that's, again, recommendation, but you just don't want to conflate that district that is most equivalent is what this district is in the new code, or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, you're not.
And that's just our kind of justification, rationale behind that.
Yeah, I mean, notes, again, the second comment says equivalency tables are currently available, but shouldn't be relied upon once the code is adopted. So that makes it clear you're not making any guarantees for the equivalency there. Just as a section, you have these changes that reduce determination times for various types of, I guess, permits, applications, and things for development from 30 to 17 days. More closely aligns with codified language with internal process of having an overall review of around 28 days was the rationale.
Yeah, so right now, thinking of the overall review process where we can say, right, 10 days to determine the application complete, and then we'd have 30 days to then review that application. So, right, the way the internal process works is basically we have, once something is determined complete, we basically have a turnaround time of around, I want to say 3 weeks. This is something that I'm not as well versed in. Usually Mr. DeLage or Mr. Price can probably speak a little bit better to it, but basically on applications that have been determined complete on this Wednesday, then they enter the review cycle, and it's about the third Friday after that is when a determination is made. So that's really kind of the internal process, even though the codified language that we have is currently a 30-day minimum.
Yeah.
Mr. Price may be able to address that a little bit more eloquently than I did.
No, you're on point.
So I appreciate the ambition and of the expediency for sure. The consequence of not issuing a decision within that time frame, based on what I'm understanding in the draft, though, is that it's a lot of applications are deemed approved or deemed exempt for whatever if there's no response from the staff in that time frame. So is staff that confident that they're not going to have items kind of passing or becoming law, as it were, due to lack of response down to 17 days?
So I'd say no. But Mr. Price, you want to address that one?
Yeah, I mean, again, our process that we've been using over the last, number of years, I wish I could go back as far, has been using the 17-day review cycle. And we've pretty much met all of those requirements for getting out our responses at the end of that 17-day review cycle.
Okay.
And this would be, Mr. Brandon, this would be looking at business days versus just calendar days.
Right. So seems a little bit snug with your 21-day average, calendar day average, but well, I like the confidence in the turn times. The next line item under that entire section towards the bottom there of that page is one that references a new subsection 5 to include language about cluster developments, and the standards that can be superseded as part of those provisions includes reduction of 75% of the dimensional standards, and then a lot width removal for R2 through R5 of cluster development provisions. So that seems pretty noteworthy. Can that be, you're going to have density, I guess, credits would still be available through the open space provisions and then potential.
Yes, so,
credits.
so one of the changes that's happening with this code from the current code. So right now, there are no minimum open space requirements. And the incentives are automatic if you use those provisions. And so what we're doing with the proposed code is we are making mandatory minimums for open space, and the incentives are not going to be automatic. So the incentives now go into the green development incentives. So you got to work a little bit more to get them. But because we're going to a density-based zoning, the need for the lot width as part of the cluster, that could be reduced, because otherwise, if you're still having a cluster with 240-foot wide lots, is that really a cluster? And so in order to preserve more of that space within that overall development, so whether that's, trees, scenic views, et cetera, you're able to cluster a little bit more specifically, reduce those lot widths up to a certain amount that would still be in relation to, what the code is trying to achieve for those areas.
Yeah, to the tune of a 75% reduction on dimensional standards
Yeah.
on the width. Yeah, so that's pretty big. Just jumping over to the second page of what you provided to us for these recommended changes over the last week. Just looking specifically at the residential classification that's proposed and looking to figure out again the equivalency of the current residential district or residential zoning district that is estate, for example. And looking at the draft code, I think it's section R2, the proposed district R2 is the one that is replacing the estate district.
So I think that's where in the footnote, it's the way that the consultant was looking at it and the way that we were looking at it varied and may not have incorporated a lot of the changes and things between the initial module 1 and then what became the public hearing draft. So we as staff, we're viewing R2 being equivalent to RSE. And then R2 being equivalent to RSLD, R1 being equivalent to RSE.
Okay. So you provided me a draft zoning equivalency chart, and I appreciate that.
Mhm.
In the absence of, a binding equivalency, these are the things that, come to my attention because certainly there's a great difference in the proposed R2 densities from the existing RSE densities. So obviously R1 would be a fair amount closer to the current RSE district. So can we have that footnote removed or moved to a different location, moved up?
I think that's something that we can do is we can just edit that footnote. Again, in relation to, a final draft, the final draft's not going to have the footnotes, and what is eventually adopted will not have footnotes either.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Again, in the absence of the equivalency chart that's binding, these are the things that I'm looking at more closely. And area sharing today, of course, that those footnotes will not be in place in the draft that may or may not be passed by county council. And then one of the last notes that I had specifically was just towards the bottom of the page 3 that related to I guess it was the green measures, increase in density from 5% to 20% in the R2 to R6 districts.
Right.
So those are density credits, right? For green?
Yes. So, and those are not automatic. Those
Okay.
you have to achieve based on the various menu in order to receive those incentives. So those could be a variety of incentives, but the density ones we felt at 5% was not any way significant. and would not be something that really would be, especially not worth what is required to achieve it.
So again, just sort of, I guess, relatedly in my mind to that, the open space credit you mentioned, there's a mandatory minimum for open space.
Yes, so that's going to be, let's see, I'm going to tell you the page that it starts on, Mr. Branham. But there's now minimum requirements for open space for certain types of developments, if not all developments. So that's going to be on page, starting on page 5-78 is going to be that section.
5-7.
5-78. So page 358 of 569, if you're looking at the PDF, 5-78 of the hard copy,
Okay.
or the printed number,
And
where those open space set aside start.
so these are mandatory, and together with the mandatory requirement though, is there density bonuses there?
No, all the density bonuses would come through those green incentives.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that's what we're saying. So we're making minimum open space required, and we're not giving automatic incentives. So you have to
Right.
achieve those certain incentives through the green development incentives versus just doing X amount of open space that the current code will allow for.
Yeah, okay. So those are more my specific notes, and I just generally wanted to offer again, I really like the style of the draft LDC and the way that it's laid out. I do feel like it will be more user-friendly if it's enacted. I really like the picture examples, the charts, the attempts at a layout that is easier to follow. It's a lot of pages, so it's daunting for someone who sits on the planning commission to try to like digest it all. And so I'm happy to feel that the general public will have an impression of greater accessibility if it is enacted. And I do thank the staff for their work. I do generally wonder if the overall move towards what I believe are pretty substantial density increases for the various zoning districts is really what the citizens of Richland County want. I feel like there is a desire to modernize the approach. I feel like I see that in the way that this is constructed. But I really don't know that, again, the citizens of Richland County, unincorporated Richland County, which is what this code would cover. It's got nothing to do per se with the city of Columbia other than comparing notes or any other municipality. This is unincorporated Richland County that is covered by this. And I think that by and large, you're looking at suburban settings, transitioning towards rural settings and rural settings. And while I understand that development will continue with a growing population, I do have some question about what I feel like is aggressive move away from the current levels of density in the development that's happening in Richland County. And that's something that, the density levels that are in place right now is something that builders and developers and individual property owners and developers have lived with for a while. We are striking a balance. We're striving to strike a balance. I'm certainly not anti-development. My record bears that out in the voting on the Planning Commission. But I do have some question and concern about the idea that we might be de-emphasizing harmony of development, looking at the context of the surrounding area. And also a very big concern for me is the lack of the binding equivalency chart when it comes to converting from the current LDC to the proposed LDC. So I think time, and I'm going to leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Mr. Branham. Are there additional comments for the staff?
Commissioner? Chairman?
Go right ahead, Commissioner Dennis.
Yes, I want to thank Commissioner Branham for going over all the stuff that he had questions about and proposed changes. I'm glad him and I actually kind of had some of the same ones. Makes me feel good, like I did my homework. But I do want to say, when I'm looking at this, I understand that Richland County is getting bigger, but I almost feel like with the density proposals that we have, it's almost too aggressive for Richland County. If this was Charlotte, Mecklenburg, or Columbus, Ohio, hey, I'm all for it. It would fit. But I think Richland County being the county, the unincorporated areas, as Commissioner Brown said, I'm struggling really hard to look at this. Now, there is another way that we can also look at this. With what we do have in front of us, if we were to adopt all this and increase the densities, then we would really need to, once all this is done, we would really need to look at our comprehensive plan. And instead of using wide brush strokes that we've used in the past, we would really need to be more fine with our brushstrokes and really look into it. With the proposed densities that we're going with on some of these, our infrastructure here in Richland County just has not kept up with it. I'm up here in the Northeast. We had a school bond get past $500 million in order to keep up with the old way we were doing things. And this is even more than what we got going on currently. And our infrastructure is just not there. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done, not just with this, but in other areas in the county, not just the planning commission, but bringing and getting our infrastructure up to par so that we can tackle increased density like this. That's just how I see it. I love the fact that we're growing in Richland County. I love the fact that we're looking to grow. I love the fact that, Richland County is not far from my hometown, Rockingham, North Carolina. It's not. It's virtually the same type of people, same type of area, same type of mindset, and I love it here. And it's just hard for me to get on board and hearing when you're out in the, you're out in public and you're hearing everybody, we're just packing them in. We're just packing them in. The voice of the people kind of resonated in my head a little bit. I just have to really think about that because that's also part of how we look at things in this. This is a whole new way of doing business. This is a way that, it can prepare us when we catch up with infrastructure to go over that hump and really be the next big thing. Or it could also cause us to have a tidal wave and fail. We just really need to look very closely at what we're doing. And that's my piece for this.
Thank you, Commissioner Dennis. Any additional comments for the staff? Well, let me say just to Commissioner Branham and Commissioner Dennis, thank you so much for your comments regarding the Land Development Code. For those of us who've sat on the commission for the last 4 years and who had an opportunity to weigh into this in terms of the creation of this document, I just want to thank the consultants and the staff and the commissioners for the work that's gone into this product. I echo Commissioner Branham's comments earlier regarding one of the important steps in creating this new document was to make sure that it was user-friendly and that it was something that the public would have the ability to be able to easily not only access, but understand. And so the consultants took much of that discussion among the commissioners, along with other very important items regarding just bringing the code up to current day standards, and has come up with what we think is a product that is worthy of being able to be adopted by this commission and sent to county council for their review as we prepare to have a new land development code in Richland County. And obviously, this is on the heels of adopting the mapping. And so, you know, I want to thank the commissioners for weighing in on this. And if once again, ask if there are any additional comments regarding the land development code from anyone else.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Go right ahead. Mr. Grady.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to briefly sort of summarize comments that I provided to staff that I believe were sent out to other members of the commission, just that I think I'm somewhat on the other side of embracing this move toward a more dense development pattern. I certainly understand the worry of a lack of infrastructure, and I share that as well, that if we're going to emphasize a denser development pattern, if we're going to do all these other things that are spoken about in the comprehensive plan, that there needs to be increased also obviously some road infrastructure as well as transit infrastructure, biking, walking, all those other things that make that denser development work rather than being a burden on the community. So that was sort of my main takeaway from the plan. I certainly also appreciate the other commissioners who went with a little more of a fine-tooth comb to highlight some of the procedural items of concern. So that's essentially all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner, for those comments for sure. And it's our hope that as Commissioner Dennis, I think, may have referred to the amount of development that's actually going on in the Northeast area with the schools and all, that somebody will get the message that it's important to begin to pay more attention to these things, and more specifically, be smarter about how we look at development. Hopefully our code will begin to yield some results in that regard, and to make everyone a little bit more cognizant of how we be a little bit more judicious and a little bit more methodical about how we think about what development should look like in the county. So thank you, Commissioner, for those comments. Any additional comments?
Mr. Chair, this is Mr. Branham.
Yes, sir, Mr. Branham.
If I could just confirm, Mr. Crooks, you're going to move that footnote on the RSE designation, correct?
I'm sorry, could you say that again, Mr. Brown?
You're going to move the RSE
Yes, yeah, I'll update the
to
footnote.
R1.
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
up those up. So whatever happens here, so basically whatever changes or no changes that the Planning Commission recommends, whatever y'all's recommendation is to County Council, we'll be including that as a red line document, and I will make those footnotes, those changes in relation to those as part of that red line document also.
And to me, I've said it before, that the equivalency chart, it's critical. It's critical to what happens next. And what is the anticipated process for locking that down, for labeling every parcel in Richland County with the updated zoning classification if the LDC passes this draft?
So I guess that would be the mapping process in terms of what is or isn't the equivalency. I mean, I think really that's the equivalency is really to provide a guide of what was the current code, what was included in it. So you kind of have this base reference point that you can refer back to and say, okay, well, now I'm this. So how was I how is that equivalent to what the old code was? Really, it's just giving you a snapshot or a baseline in terms of that current code that we have now in relation to the proposed code. But otherwise, in terms of determining what you would be or wouldn't be, that is going to be the remapping process in a nutshell. And so really the next step in relation to the planning commission, once you all are done with the text, our intention is to then have a work session as we did similar to county council in regards to the map. And what all does that look like? What all are we looking at? What all does that entail? And so that way we can get some input from you all in relation to it. But Mr. Branham, I guess my understanding of your question, that would be done as part of that remapping process, is when everybody would know what would be the zoning that I'm going to be having under the new code. That would be the remapping process.
And Mr. Crooks, I'm sorry, Commissioner Branham, go ahead.
So I'm sure thought was put into this. I'm just, so an alternative might be to just have a strict conversion table as a starting point so that the public and county council and whoever else would have a little bit more level of confidence and comfort level as far as this is what I own right now, and these will be the permitted uses and the density if and when the LDC draft passes. Why aren't we going that route?
I mean, I guess we could. I guess our point being that the zoning district table, as it's noted within, section 26-1.9 as part of those transitional provisions, there's nothing that's going to be a guarantee that, okay, you are this thing, that you are becoming that thing. And I think that's what we're trying to get at, is there's not going to be 100% guarantee. There's going to be some where, yeah, you're going to be, 90%, 95% certain that if you're this, yeah, you're probably going to become that. But there's not going to be that overall guarantee as it was with, say, the 2005 code, that if you were that district, that you become this district. There's not going to be that guarantee with this code. But in terms of providing a table as part of that draft that says, here's what generally is the most equivalent, and then note what we think is, how we're defining equivalency, what all that entails. Yeah, we can do that. That's fine. We just kind of, from our point being that this is a new code, we don't want it to, again, just being an update. This is a new code. But if that is the recommendation of the commission, we can definitely include that.
Yeah, that's the tremendous risk. That's the tremendous step into the dark, whatever you want to call it, of faith, is that nobody knows what any parcel in Richland County is going to be zoned for if it passes. And it just seems like it's avoidable. I think you could go back and do fine tuning after the fact, but right now we're relying on the guidance in the charts as far as general description goes, and we're relying on footnotes that we understand are not going to be codified. So that's just me, and that's just my opinion. I'm having a hard time getting past that. And I just feel like it's avoidable. So that was kind of my question, is just why not? Why would we not go ahead and do that, especially in light of the fact that it's a wholesale replacement of the current LDC?
Thank you, Mr. Branham, for those comments. Mr. Crooks, did you mention, or did I hear you correct earlier, that that you sent Mr. Branham the equivalence chart? Is that right?
Yeah, did that not get to everybody else?
I just want to make sure that all commissioners received that.
Okay, let me forward that back out to everyone. It's also the chart that was in the various presentations that we've been having.
Correct.
Let me send this back out to you all. So just sent that back out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. Branham, are there any additional comments?
I guess Mr. Crooks answered my question as best he could, but that was just the question, was why not go that route? So
Yes, sir.
I thank him for providing the chart.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any additional comments from commissioners? Thank you all so much for the healthy discussion regarding our land development code. These are great questions and very good information to have logged as we go before county council. And let me ask one other question to the staff. In no way, if the commissioners adopt the plan today and it goes before county council, will commissioners still have an opportunity to weigh in on that during county council's deliberations, if they so choose to do so?
I don't know why you couldn't submit comments, Mr. Price.
And I was just going to ask, are you looking to comment as the planning commissioner or just individual citizens?
Well, I think, if individual commissioners have additional comments or concerns about it, certainly I don't see any reason why they couldn't submit those as comments. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, right. Your rights as a citizen are still being observed. So as a citizen of Richland County, if you do have some comments that you would like to provide to council, you can. That's what I was just trying to make a distinction between the individual comments versus those coming in additionally from the planning commission.
You're right. Yeah, I think once the planning commission adopts it, if a certain commissioner wanted to go and further provide commentary, that and I guess we could define that as an individual citizen, that there shouldn't be any provision that prevents them from doing that. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Any additional comments from the commissioners? Any additional comments from the staff?
So I guess, Mr. Chair, I guess maybe I'll sort of comment the question being, how would the commission prefer to move forward with their recommendations? Especially looking at our recommended changes from staff, taking those as a one by one or selecting certain ones out, or I guess what would be the preference on how that is done?
Mr. Crooks, I missed the last part of what you were saying. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that, please?
I guess process or procedure wise, what would be the commission's preference in terms of how the recommended changes are taken up? Do take them up as a whole, individually, so go line by line, or pulling out certain recommendations, whether or not there needs to be additional discussion or thoughts related to those? How would the commission wish to proceed with that?
Well, obviously, if this is Gilchrist speaking, if there are additional concerns that we want to address based upon the feedback you received today, it may be worth just taking those items and providing some clarity back to commissioners, if I'm understanding your question correctly. I guess
So, Mr. Chair, I would say then, I guess based on that, I would say we take up the recommended changes as a whole and remove certain lines, as we've had kind of comments and discussion about some of those made based on what some of that input was. And then go from there if that works for the commission.
So when we say go from there, what do we mean? Adopt? Help me understand what you mean by that.
So recommending as a whole these changes, with the exception of certain ones, and then taking those recommended changes up individually for the commission to either say yes or no for that recommendation. So for instance, looking at recommended change number 1, so remove section 26-1.9E zoning district from the text. So taking that one out and then voting on others. So we know which ones get taken out and then which ones take up individually. Does that make sense?
I think so. That will require obviously a motion from either Commissioner Branham and or Dennis regarding those sections that they raised. And I guess we vote on them one by one. Is that what you're asking? Is that right?
Right, yeah, so I guess my question is, do we want to vote on all of them one by one or only certain ones one by one? So basically dividing the question in terms of the recommendation and taking them in parts.
Well, I would, I would certainly think we would want to do it in parts, but I would, certainly yield to the commissioners that raised some concerns about that. Commissioner Dennis and Brown, do you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, there's certainly ones that I feel more strongly about than others. Obviously, I've spoken to that first line item, so that is a good example of one that I would really like to see removed, that recommended change. But I guess then the question is, what gets inserted into that section?
So it would just be leaving that section as is, so that table would get filled out. If the commission did not recommend to remove that section, then that section would get filled.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Mr. Random?
It does, but I mean, it gets filled in after we've already voted, so that it's like still just a blank space.
No. So we would be filling it with what, so I guess you could take it two ways, is we fill it with what that equivalent would be, or as part of the recommendation of the commission, recommend that X, Y, and Z textually occurs.
You could potentially, you would fill it with the zoning equivalencies table that you provided me.
Basically, yeah, but it would be the complete table for all the zoning districts versus just the residential districts. And a couple of commercial, I believe, is what is on there.
I got you.
So it'd basically be adding the language that says, this is the equivalency coming from the old code to the new code. Here's the old districts. Here's the proposed new districts and their most equivalents.
And is that in the LDC draft from April?
It is not. It just says insert zoning district transition table. So it was one of those kind of missing pieces based on everything that would get finalized as part of the code itself.
Okay. I feel like that obviously I feel like that's very important to me and to the people. So I would really like to see that as part of a vote on the whole thing. So preliminary, first things first, I mean, if I could make a motion to delete the top recommended change, which is to remove section 26-1.9E zoning districts from the text. And then we could just take a vote on that, because obviously I don't know how the whole commission feels about it.
Okay. So if I'm hearing correctly, it's a motion that's been made by Commissioner Brown. Is there a second?
I'll
Is there
second
a
that.
Okay. It's been moved and properly second then that we remove that section from the code and take it up as a separate issue. So is that right, Mr. Branham? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor, we can take a roll call vote. Mr. Price. Mr. Price.
Apologies, I was muted. I was just asking, could you restate, Mr. Branham, could you restate again what it is that we're removing at this point?
Yes, the motion is to remove the recommended change that was presented by staff to the Planning Commission, which is described as remove section 26-1.9E zoning districts from the text. And my motion is for the purpose of including a zoning district transition table in the version of the LDC that the commission would then vote on potentially as a whole.
Okay.
And that motion has been seconded by Mr. Dennis, is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
All right. Roll call. Gilchrist,
aye.
Carnes, Yonke,
Aye.
Carlisle,
Aye.
Dennis. Dennis,
Aye.
Grady,
Aye.
Taylor,
Aye.
Branham,
Aye.
Frierson.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes.
Okay. Great.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I just-
Go right ahead.
And Mr. Price, I just wanted, Mr. Brand, I want to make sure I understood that motion correctly. So we're saying remove that recommendation as it was listed, and now to include the transition table itself within the code. Is that correct?
Yes, and
All right, that was how I understood it. I just want to make sure that was what it was.
Right. Yes, yes.
The transition table you provided for Mr. Branham was an abbreviated one that only included residential. Is
Right.
that correct?
Yes, sir. So it is residential, and I think it had like general commercial and NC on there, but the version that gets included here will be all
Okay.
of the zoning districts, but it would just be the zoning district to the zoning district. It's not going to have like their density or any of that
Gotcha.
stuff. It would just be what is the equivalent district in terms of what it is and what the new one potentially.
Just wanted to be sure it wasn't an abbreviated version. Thank
Right.
you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. Clarification. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could,
Yes, sir, Mr. Brown.
to ask staff, are they able to provide us with the complete table now?
Let's see. I don't know if I'd be able to pull it together right now.
Can,
But for the most part, everything else would be generally what is listed in the footnote. For the-
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, so the zoning equivalency abbreviated chart provided to us is fully in harmony with the table that would be inserted.
Yeah. So in
Correct.
terms of the residential stuff, and I think that's also, that table's noted in our quote unquote cheat sheet that's on the department webpage in relation to the code. And that's the same table that's been elsewhere. So looking at the few residential districts and the handful of commercial ones. So we would just have all the zoning districts included that's missing.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Crooks. Thank you, Mr. Branham. Any additional comments? If there are none, Price, we are now to take a vote on the adopting the code. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, if there are no additional comments, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt the land development code.
Chair?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair? It's Mr.
Yeah.
Crook. One point of clarity, this would be based, recommending with the recommended changes from staff.
I'm sorry. Say that again, Mr.
So
Crooks.
with your your motion to adopt the recommendation, I'm sorry. So your recommendation includes the recommended changes.
That's correct. Yes.
All right, just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Can I try to clarify? I'm sorry.
Mr. Yonke? Yes, go right ahead.
This is Mr. Branham.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brandon. Sorry.
No problem. The zoning equivalencies chart provided to us, does that not differ from some of the recommended changes when it relates to like the residential zoning district densities? Or is
I'm sorry, Ms. Brown, I don't think I'm understanding.
the zoning equivalencies chart that was provided that you've indicated is in line with the table that will be inserted? See,
So where it's got new and where it's got old,
Uh-huh.
That would be what we're including. We wouldn't be including an equivalent density. It would just be what the district, the old district is and what the new district is.
And the new district densities match the recommended changes for densities? Because I feel like I'm seeing a difference. R2, for example, on the chart says 3, and then the recommended changes 2 says 4.
Yeah, so that would be, so we wouldn't be including the density in the equivalency table under Article 1. That equivalency table would only be showing the zoning district from the old code and the zoning district from the proposed code. It wouldn't have any other information in terms of that chart.
Okay, so I guess I would make a motion then to have the densities for the districts set forth in the equivalency table be the densities that are included in the table for the draft LDC.
Okay, is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and properly seconded that we include the densities on the draft proposal, on the proposed land development code as proposed by Commissioner Branham. Any additional discussion? If not, Price will take a roll call vote.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this.
Yep.
So
Commissioner Dennis.
what we're saying is we're voting on the density that was on the zoning equivalency table versus the changes that were made on page 2, block 1, 2, or on page 2, line item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
And I would say that if I could clarify my motion,
Yes, sir, please.
the densities, the new densities on the zoning equivalency chart, my intention would be to have those be in place of the recommended changes as they relate to those R1 through 6 set forth on the recommended changes chart.
So
It
basically,
would be more than density. It would be all the other changed parameters set forth as to each one of those residential districts. So I guess at the end of the day, it's like delete. My motion is to delete the first 6 changes on page 2.
And include them in the chart.
And include the densities on the chart as they are currently set forth. Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Yes, sir.
okay. I understand that now. I just wanted to make sure that's what we were doing.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, Mr. Branham, for clarification on that. Is there a second on that motion?
I second it.
Okay. It's been moved and properly second. All in favor, signify a roll call vote, Mr. Price.
Okay, Gilchrist,
Aye.
Carnes, Yankee,
Aye.
Carlisle,
Aye.
Dennis,
Aye.
Grady,
No.
Taylor,
Aye.
Branham,
Aye.
Frierson.
Aye.
And motion passes.
Okay. So that brings us back to the adoption of the entire code. Is that right, Mr. Price?
Mr. Chair, I just want to get
Yes.
some clarity on that motion again. So
Crooks.
for that motion, was that just for the densities? Or did that also include elements related to lot widths and setbacks?
All the elements. That was what I clarified before the vote.
Okay, so all the elements listed in there. Okay.
Is that good, Mr. Crooks?
I believe so.
Okay. And again, I just want to remind the commissioners that this will be sent to county council for their review. And I am sure council will have the ability to weigh in on this in a much more detailed manner based upon their respective districts in which they represent. And so I know I will be encouraging council to be mindful of the recommendations that this body has made, and to make sure that as they think about the planning efforts to in the county and what they want a planning commission in the future to really be focused on as it relates to the new code, that's consistent with what we are seeking to adopt here today. So, all right, any additional comments? So does that bring us back to adopting the code, Mr. Pryor?
We believe it does, sir.
Okay, all right. Well, if there are no additional comments, I will certainly entertain a motion from commissioners to adopt the new land development code to be prepared to send forth to county council. Is there a motion to do so?
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair.
Is that Commissioner Dennis?
Mr. Branham.
Commissioner Branham? Okay, all right. I'm sorry, I'm missing everybody's name.
Yeah,
okay.
I need to get my video feedback for you.
No, you're fine. You're good.
Thank you for guiding us through this conversation today. Much appreciated. And yeah, my motion is to send this to county council with a recommendation of an adoption with the recommended changes minus those that we removed or modified today by vote.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and properly second that we send the new land development code forward to council with an adoption by the Richland County Planning Commission, minus the changes we made today and the recommendations set forth in the new proposal. If there are no additional discussion, Mr. Price will prepare for the roll call vote.
All right. Gilchrist,
Aye.
Carnes, Yonke,
Aye.
Carlisle,
Aye.
Dennis,
Aye.
Grady,
Aye.
Taylor,
Aye.
Branham,
Aye.
Frierson.
Yes.
I think that's a unanimous vote. Is that right, Mr. Price?
Yes, it is.
Well, if we would do a hip hip hooray dance today for a very long journey to get to this point, but I can't thank this fine commission enough for the work that you put into this, and to our wonderful staff who has guided us through this process for these number of years to get us to this point. This is very exciting for the county. It's very exciting for the citizens of the county. I think it accomplishes what we set out to do the day we decided that we would move forward with updating our land development code in Richland County. As someone who's been around this work for a very long time, I'm excited about what we've accomplished in Richland County, and I want to thank you for taking on this task and being very diligent about ensuring that we provide a sound document for planning purposes in this county going forward. And so with that, I want to thank you. Any additional comments from commissioners?
Mr. Chair.
I got one.
Sorry, who's that? I don't know who that is.
Another commissioner has something they can.
It's Commissioner Dennis.
Okay, Commissioner Dennis, sure, right here.
Yeah, I just wanted to personally thank staff. Thank you very much for getting all this stuff out I know we asked for that extra time, but I needed it. I definitely needed it to go through this line by line and go through this thing with those changes. Thank you to all the other commissioners working with us, getting this done. I look forward to the future, and I can't wait to see what this holds.
Thank you, Commissioner Dennis.
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Fryerson. I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Price.
The June meeting of County Council, will it be in person or a Zoom meeting?
Do we know that yet, Mr. Price?
Yes, council is scheduled to meet in person on July the 13th. So just to answer your question directly, Commissioner Fryerson, that meeting will, on the 22nd of June, will be a Zoom meeting,
Thank you. And what time will that meeting be?
7 p.m.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Fryerson.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir. Is it Mr. Crooks?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So there's a couple of other points that the commissioners noted today, and I just didn't know if we wanted to go ahead and take those up now, since they weren't specifically listed in the recommendation list, or just leave those off. So for instance, clarifying the language about posting of signs, the missing power and duty related to approval of street names. We would need specific motions related to those since they were not included in that recommendation list.
Okay. I think we can go back and make an amendment. Can we make an amendment to the code for those items, Price?
You could just do an additional motion rather than having to do an amendment. You just
Okay. All right. That's
do an
fine.
additional motion to make those changes or have those be included in the y'all's recommended land development code.
Okay. Chair, we entertain a motion to include those items.
Mr. Chair, would it be, before you all do that, would you all repeat specifically what it is that we are asking to be done, please?
Sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
So
you.
in relation to some of the points that were brought up earlier in the conversation, so on page 2-4, there's missing information related to the commission's powers and duties on providing street name approval. So we would just add that power under section 26-2.3B1B, add that language there. And then under the table for 26-2.4G2 on page 2-16, clarify the language in the table note related to posting sign notice. And those are the two that were mentioned specifically by the commission earlier.
Does that help, Commissioner Fryerson?
Yes.
Commissioner Fryerson? Okay. All right.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, just a couple of administrative things that we needed to, I think Commissioner Branham brought those up earlier. Chair, we entertain a motion on those items.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. All in
I have
favor?
a question. Can I,
Okay, Commissioner Taylor? Yes, sir.
was the, with the distances for the sign postings, was there a recommended change for the distance or was it to leave it where it was? Did you think, I think the way I understood it is moving it to 1,000 feet was going to be too much. Did that mean just leave it where it was, Commissioner Branham?
I would amend my motion to include that provision. I just wasn't sure of the, appetite of the commission and whether we should vote on that separately from the other two, but I would like for us to take a vote on that. So I'll amend my
Okay.
that third provision. And request that it revert to the current distances set forth in the current LDs.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. And the second still remains?
The second still remains from Commissioner Dennis.
Okay. All right. Any
Mr.
further
Chair,
discussion?
Before we call for the vote, can you give staff a second to take a look at that language again?
Sure.
'Cause I just want to make sure that what we're in relation to it. So, Mr. Brandon, are you saying change it from 1,000 feet to 300 feet?
I wanted to say what the current LDC says, if we can use those same distances and scenarios. I don't
Right.
have the exact wording in front of me.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Crooks, what is it showing on the current LCD?
That's what I wanted to check on, because this is not something that I deal with on a regular basis. That's usually
Okay.
Mr. DeLage.
It's 26-52F2C of the current LDC.
So we're looking at what our current code requires for
Postings.
digitally signed postings?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay,
So I know one major change is simplification of the overall process and procedure, because right now we have like different thresholds basically in relation to that. But so that's why I wanted to get some clarification. Sorry, Mr. Price.
no.
I feel like the distances set forth in the current LDC are acceptable, are adequate, are reasonable. Apparently, there's some variation for some scenarios because the footnote referencing it on page 2-17 of the draft LDC says requires one every 100 to 300 feet of road frontage, depending on the size of the lot or parcel.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's 5 different potential ones.
I mean, obviously, I'm just trying to provide the public with a reasonable opportunity for notice
Right.
an application. So
Yeah, I just, that's why I was asking, would you want it to be? Because right now it's listed, so the current language is hearing notices shall be located as follows. 1, for lots or parcels with road frontage of 100 feet or less, 1 hearing notice shall be placed on each lot or parcel. 2, for lots or parcels with road frontage greater than 100 feet but less than 500 feet, 1 hearing notice shall be placed for every 100 feet of road frontage or portion thereof. 3, for lots or parcels with road frontage greater than 500 feet but less than 1,000 feet, 1 hearing notice shall be placed for every 200 feet of road frontage or portion thereof. For lots or parcels of land with road frontage of 1,000 feet or greater, 1 public hearing notice shall be placed for every 300 feet of road frontage or portion thereof. And then the 5th option is basically the footnote related to the multi-parcel posting.
I
And
know
what
it's
was
a
it?
lot of words, but I'm comfortable with what it says.
Yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'm perfectly comfortable myself.
So I guess, I mean, I think one thing, I guess, from our perspective, would it be easier than to just say 1 every 150 feet? Otherwise, that way it's a 1 number and we just list it as, we just have the 1 every time and it's 150 feet for every, so rather than 1,000 feet, we say 150 feet.
I'm fine with that language.
Mr. Price, do you have any input on that?
So I was reading, so I'm sorry, sir. I was just reading over the language, so I apologize. Could you repeat that? I'm sorry, could you repeat?
I just asked if you had any input on that, on the
Yeah, so Mr. Price,
recommended.
Posting requirements?
I mentioned 1 every 150 feet instead of 1 every 1,000 feet, rather than having the 4 options that are currently listed within the code.
Correct. Yeah, I think one of the issues over the years what we have found, and I apologize, Mr. Branham and the rest of the commission, that I don't have a specific distance in mind for you at this point. But one of the things that we have found over the years is that, from posting properties, remember, I'll just use my own time being here, is that just by the requirements of what's in the current code, I think sometimes we've just over posted a property. I mean, I think it's just required way more than is totally necessary. And there've been actually times when we've actually squeezed in had to, squeezing in a sign unnecessarily. So one of the things I think that the proposed land development code was trying to do is just kind of reduce that a bit. Now, I believe in your opinion, I guess I'll just point to you, Mr. Branham, is that maybe it was a little excessive on what we were trying to reduce. So what we can probably want to look at is I think as Mr. Crook is alluding to, maybe something more of an in between, because one of the things as a staff that we do is we make sure it's not a matter of the number of signs that you're posting. It is always about the proximity of the sign to the traffic that we're trying to advertise towards. So for example, there are times when we actually, you may actually have a parcel, let's say has no street frontage, but we actually go beyond that than just putting up one sign. There are some cases where a parcel has less than 100 feet, but we will put up additional signs because what we want to make sure of is that it is clearly advertised and noted to the public that a request is coming. I don't know how we can necessarily address that with that language, but understanding, requiring a certain number of signs doesn't necessarily guarantee that everyone will be notified. It's all about the location of where we place the signs.
Yeah, and I know we don't want to get into requiring specific locations and points of interest and landmarks and all that stuff. So I can appreciate just a desire for simplicity. The proposal was for at least one every 150 feet.
Yes, sir, that's what I mentioned. And if there's another number that the commission has in mind, I'm just kind of throwing that out there as food for thought, that in relation to, what is generally listed, it's either 100 feet or 500 feet.
Yeah.
So, I feel like 150 is kind of, it's generally 100, 200, or every 1,000 is really kind of what, or 300. So, 150, 200, that kind of seems to be the sweet spot for some of these, but for some of the smaller parcels, maybe 150 is more appropriate. So
Right.
I would suggest 150 or 200.
Okay. All right. I'm happy to amend my motion, particularly for simplicity's sake of the LDC, have the posting requirement distance be reported as requiring to include at least one notice for every 100 feet, 150 feet, or fraction thereof of street frontage. And that's the third component of the motion that's on the table.
Okay.
I still second.
All right. So they're moved and properly second, then that we modified the motion to include the 150 feet. Any discussion? Okay, if not, Ms. Price, we'll take a roll call vote.
Okay. Keep notes. Gilchrist,
Aye.
Carnes, Yonke,
Aye.
Carlisle,
Aye.
Dennis,
Aye.
Grady,
Aye.
Taylor,
Aye.
Branham,
Aye.
Frierson.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes, and I think that concludes our business for the day. Is that right, Bryce?
Yes, sir.
I believe so.
Mr. Crooks, do you agree with Mr. Price?
I believe so. I don't think there's anything else that I can think of.
Well, again, everybody, thank you for weighing in on this. As I mentioned before, we have this will get to county council, and they will have the opportunity to kind of chime in on this, and individual commissioners who would like to comment as citizens of the county and the unincorporated areas of the county, feel free to consider that as we move forward. But again, I want to thank all of you for your diligence and your work on this document. I'm excited about what we hope this will mean for the county's future development projects. If there's nothing else to claim our attention, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir, Ms. Price.
Because you know I can't just let y'all just go straight to an adjournment, so I apologize. The planning commission is scheduled to meet on July the 12th. And that potentially will be our last Zoom meeting. You know, I know some things are still up in the air, but potentially that'll probably be our last Zoom meeting. And of course, y'all don't meet in August. One of the things that I know we briefly touched on, I guess, for the year, during this year, is potentially looking at a retreat that we have done previously for the planning commission. So we may want to just start looking into that, you know, especially as we kind of get into the August break, which we typically have, or maybe sometime in September. And so I would just ask that as we go to our July 12th meeting, or any time before, if any of the planning commission members would have any specific topics that you would like addressed during the retreat. I thought the last retreat we had was we brought in members from the residential and commercial and industrial industries. And I thought that was a very beneficial and probably one of our better retreats. And so what we would just look at is which specific topics that you, the planning commission members would like for us to try to address during the next retreat.
Thank you for bringing that point up, Mr. Price. You know, I know when this commission decided to do retreats about 4 years ago, or however long it was, you know, I think they all were very beneficial, have been very beneficial. And I think not only have the members of the public, including commercial and residential organizations, have benefited from it, but even our own county staff has benefited from being able to participate in those retreats. And so, yes, I would echo your sentiments that, you know, as we think about what that agenda should look like, if there are commissioners who have, and some of the commissioners who have not had an opportunity to participate in one of our annual retreats, but it's always a great opportunity to really refocus our efforts to begin our planning work in the county. And certainly, I would say that that's a critical thing to occur this year, given the fact that we have now moved the Land Development Code on to County Council for their approval. So yes, thank you, Mr. Price, for bringing that up, and we can discuss this a little bit more in detail at our July 12th meeting. Okay, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. Chair, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Second.
All right, all in favor, roll call vote, Mr. Price?
Okay. Gilchrist,
Aye.
Yonke,
Aye.
Carlisle,
Aye.
Dennis,
Aye.
Grady,
Aye.
Taylor,
Aye.
Branham,
Aye.
Frierson. All right. 7-0. That motion passes, so we are now adjourned.
Have a good week, everybody.
Thank you all.
All right.
Have a good
Thanks.
one.
Bye-bye.